Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Solar storms, everyone. Solar activity rises and falls periodically over an 11-year solar cycle. To my knowledge, in 2025, July 2025, we will reach the peak of this cycle, called a solar maximum. However, did they come up with that name? Placing us at an 11-year high risk of significant damage caused by a solar event. Known as a Carrington level event, named after one of the worst solar storms in recent times, our risk of a Carrington level event is typically 4%. But at the peak of a solar maximum, our risk is to something like 28%. Now, I'm not a prepper or anything like that, but as a fun thought experiment, I wanted to go through some preparedness ideas for us in this particularly high risk time. And I'm not claiming to be an expert in this field or an expert in packing backpacks. I did go to school for Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and after that became a soldier in the U.S. Army. I graduated from the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in school with a diploma in civil affairs, which involves governance, pre and post disaster, man made or natural. We covered disaster mitigation, preparedness and response, survival, and combat in various environments. I'm also a certified LEMR, law enforcement medical responder, and some other things, but those are probably the most relevant ones for the sake of this conversation. So, where do we start? Bug out or bug in? I won't spend too much time on this topic because it's been played out to the extreme. I'm sure it's everywhere on YouTube. In my unit, I was notorious for a sometimes ridiculous level of minimalism, so my gear optimized for lightweight. And I'm sure Karen in the comments will disagree with everything I say. But yeah, there are a lot of really useful things that I didn't bring with me on our FTXs because I didn't want the weight. For example, I never carried a sleep system with me. I just was perfectly fine sleeping on the ground, following the philosophy that ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. During some of our FTXs, a lot of the guys had something like 100 pounds of gear, and I had like 20. But there are a lot of really useful things that I brought, which no one else did, like, for example, a bar of soap, chapstick, but we'll get into those things pretty soon. So, what to pack? Well, the answer depends on the environment. For example, are you in Florida during the summer, or are you in Montana during the winter? As you can imagine, your kit is going to be a lot different based on where you are. Big difference between being in New Jersey and eastern Ukraine right now. On second thought, you may want full battle rattle in New Jersey too, so I take that back. Now, in war, the Army optimizes for security. Just going by memory, I think the order of operations was security, medical, food, personal hygiene, sleep. Now, here's where I'm going to get a lot of backlash. In the civilian world, that order of operations does us less good. For example, statistically speaking, most pickles you get yourself into in the United States, a firearm or security was not the most important item to have in people's go bags. Statistically, when people in the US could have made a bad situation better by having a go bag, it's because they didn't have warm clothes, water, or first aid items like a tourniquet. I'm obviously not going to cover every possible situation, so we're going to go over the essentials that could be considered universal, though not in order of importance. Number 1, communication. Your phone is useless if it's dead, so have a power bank, have it charged. These things do degrade over time, especially if they're sitting in a car below freezing temperatures. So keep that in mind. If you can afford it, a satellite phone is worth its weight in gold. Just based on my personal experience and the stories I've heard, the people who have gotten themselves killed in the United States for lack of preparedness could have gotten themselves out of that situation had they just had a working cell phone or a satellite phone on them. Number 2, regulate body temperature. If it's really cold outside, then have warm clothes, extra pair of warm clothing. If it's hot outside, try to stay cool. And here's another place where I differed from a lot of my army buddies. They would pack these extensive sleep systems, 10 pairs of socks, 13 pairs of underwear. I, on the other hand, would dress in layers, very warm if it was cold outside. And even if it was not cold outside, I would have 1 or 2 extra pairs of socks and 1 or 2 extra pairs of underwear and a bar of soap. Every night as part of my personal hygiene routine, if water is available, you can do this. Wash and rinse the pair of socks and the pair of underwear. Hang them up on the back of your assault pack and conduct your business the next day while letting them dry. At the end of the evening, I would put them on and wash the pair that I was wearing. Hang them up and literally rinse and repeat. Do the same thing. Another reason that training is important because you have the opportunity to work on your field craft. do what works for you, and a lot of times that's different than what works for other people. Number 3, medical, life-saving medication if you take medication, and a tourniquet or two. As they say, you got one, you got none. And a tourniquet is one of the most useful things you can have. And number 3, your papers, your ID and some cash. I keep my ID with my phone, so number 1 and number 4 are sort of connected. Now, some real-world advice from experience. Sometimes in disaster zones, in order to prevent looting, emergency responders will section off certain areas, and that area just might happen to be your neighborhood. So you might want to have a piece of mail with you that provides proof of residence, something with your name and address on it. Now, for most people, that is their driver's license. But again, if you have one, you've got none. So it can't hurt to stick a piece of paper with your name and address, like a utility bill or something, into your bug-out bag. Statistically, it's very unlikely that you'll be in a without rule of law type situation in the US. Still, I'm bringing a gun because that's just the kind of guy I am. But unless you have a permit, as soon as you put this in here, that's a felony, Buster. So if you plan on keeping this go bag with you at all times or in the trunk of your car, don't put a gun in there without a permit. Plus, if somebody breaks into your car or steals your car altogether, well, then you've just done the world a huge disservice. Now, I know, yeah, but guy is going to chime in and say, yeah, but in a natural disaster, it's possible that it can lead to looting and madness and mayhem and zombies and all kinds of stuff. And okay, thanks, yeah, but guy. That is true. But you weren't paying attention. My point was that it's statistically less common in the US that you'll find yourself in that kind of situation. Speaking of common, this brings up a huge thing that's very common. Have an action plan for your pets. Every year, some idiot didn't have a plan for their pets. So the pet gets stuck in the backyard. When the owner flees the area, and emergency responders have to come across your dead pets, and it's tragic. Or, and this happens a lot, someone is asking emergency responders to rescue their pets. And now you're putting other people at risk. So have a plan for your pets. Now, I'm bringing my German Shepherd with me everywhere I go, not for security, but because I love her. However, they also make great early warning systems. If someone so much as farts 1 block away and across the street, she's at the window letting me know. And speaking of windows and statistics, houses with large dogs are statistically less likely to be broken into. Still, I would never use my dog for defense because I don't want her to be injured. I'd much prefer she stay out of the way and let me handle it. Still, like I said, they're great for deterrence, and the best way to handle a bad situation is to avoid it entirely. The potential issue with a dog is that you'll then need more supplies. However, in my case, my dogs carry their own weight, literally in this case. They're like my little donkeys. They carry their own water, and they've got their own bug-out bag. Even though water is less of a concern for them because, unlike humans, they can stick their furry little faces in nasty water and drink somehow without getting sick. So I've got some dewormer in there and water bottles. Save the bottles if you use them. You can always refill them and filter it. And number 5, one of the most important things, water. And a way to get more water, potable water. You can do that by way of one of those handy dandy filters with the thread that fits on top of a standard water bottle. Or those iodine tablets. Just follow the instructions. Make sure you shake it. Then wait and then shake it again. And now for some things that I've found really helpful over the years in my experience. A scarf or a balaclava, or however you pronounce it. A good pair of work gloves. The type that you get will depend on the temperature. You're going to make fun of me for this, but I always have chapstick. For the obvious reasons, but also you can put it on dry skin, like if you get a cracked skin on the back of your knuckle or something. If you really have to, you can use it to lubricate equipment. A little mirror, and yes, this is like the ones that women use to put on makeup. I can't tell you how many times I got something in my eye and needed to rinse my eye out. Or get out a tissue and fish out something from my eye, and that brings us to the next thing, is a few tissues in a Ziploc bag. And speaking of bags, you should probably have a large trash bag. Put all of these items inside the trash bag, close the bag, and put it inside of your backpack. This is to keep things dry. You can also use the bag if you need to. I've personally found that rubber gloves are worth the wait, because field sanitation is incredibly important, and you may not have the luxury of being able to wash your hands. So if you're cutting up a fish, or you're working on somebody who's injured, or you need to move an animal carcass or a human body, God forbid, you can simply put the gloves on and take them off. Something to write with. You can't go wrong with a pencil. Pens and markers don't always work, but lead always works, guaranteed. It can even get wet. You never know when you may need to write down a license plate or a password or directions or a phone number or something along those lines. I'm also going to toss a box of bullets in there. This is a Whoopee. I'm not saying you should bring it, but it makes the world's best beach blanket. It's almost as if the Department of Defense specifically designed this for the beach. It stays relatively cool when it's hot out, and when you're done at the beach, you pick it up, give it a couple shakes, and there's not one grain of sand left on this thing. Now, what is the best shit hits the fan vehicle? It is absolutely not one of these purpose-built zombie apocalypse vehicles like the Resvani or any of the other ones. These are probably the last type of vehicle you want. A lot of these things get something like 8 to 12 miles a gallon. I'm sure it's insanely difficult to get parts for them or anyone willing to work on them. And these low production vehicles are usually plagued with issues. I've been in countries during shit hits the fan types of scenarios without rule of law, and I can tell you from personal experience that fuel becomes worth its weight in gold. And so fuel economy and your vehicle's reliability will become the most important thing in the world to you at that moment. And so I'm going to sound like a broken record to some of my friends, but the Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid is going to check all of those boxes for me. If you want, you can run it entirely on gas, and if you don't have gas, you can run it entirely on electric, or you can drive it in hybrid mode and get a combination of both. The Toyota drivetrain is known for its reliability, and to say that this car has been mass-produced is the understatement of the century. They are everywhere. So parts are incredibly abundant, and working on it yourself or finding someone who can work on it for you shouldn't be a problem at all. There are other plug-in hybrids, but this one has also the benefit of a little bit of ground clearance. I would say a 4Runner or one of those other vehicles, Land Cruiser or whatever, but at the time of this video, they don't come in a plug-in version. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'm sure I'll read it. Right now I get like one comment a month, so no problem at all getting back to you. Thanks a lot. Toodaloo!